This image captures the scenes that took place on Burntollet Bridge on the 4th of January 1969. This incident was the culmination of mounting tension in relation to a controversial People's Democracy long march between Belfast and Derry. This march, modelled on the 1965 Selma to Montgomery US Civil Rights March, set off from Queen's on New Year's Day with the objective of reaching Derry's Guildhall. Along the way, the march met with repeated counter-demonstrations, tense standoffs and many reroutes. On Burntollet Bridge, the cortege was attacked by Unionist counter-protestors.
And so we thought this was a great idea, just as, Martin Luther King was walking into the capital of discrimination and going into Montgomery, Alabama. We were going to do the same and going into Derry. That was the message we wanted to get across. And we were at least I think a lot of us were extremely naive. We asked for and got permission to go on that march. The decision was made that we were going to march the route which would go through both Catholic and Protestant areas to demonstrate that we were non-sectarian.
There was periods of conflict which were reasonably well contained and well managed by the police, but it was a bit scary whenever you were involved in it, and when you knew that when you're coat trailing, what can happen is that those who are opposed to you will find justification for violence and think you are coat trailing. So Burntollet was an extreme example of that. The plans were led by the locals that they were going to do something there.
And I had showed sort of moral support, but I hadn't. I had the reservations about the danger and the confrontation. It was a bit like sort of trailing the coat, and it's the leadership had in the past, in my opinion, been irresponsible and had been had their own agenda.
Burntollet, obviously, what it was a reaction largely on the part of Unionists to halt what was a coat trailing exercise, really. It certainly was a crunch moment. I'll put it that way. It was a crunch moment for the people's democracy. It was a crunch moment for the people's democracy. Now, the people were beginning to see that the Unionist people were beginning to awake, and they were not going to just allow themselves to be trampled on. And that was the case, and that is presently the case, and is likely to be the case in the future.
And we neared Burntollet Bridge, were stopped and told that this was definitely an illegal march. We were likely to meet trouble up ahead. They didn't say what kind of trouble. So we knew there would be trouble, but we were like in a ravine, and when we were in the ravine walking through and looked up, it was like seeing in the cowboy pictures the ranks of, it looked paramilitary, right along both edges at the top with stones, cudgels, and they just rained down on us. So people were falling like ninepins, blood, all of that. People tried to get away going through streams, they were cudgelled in the streams. The police managed to keep us all together, get us through, battered, bruised and all the rest of it.
The Union would have been so much stronger if those guys had just stayed in their beds who carried out the attack. That's a simple fact. It was disastrous public relations. But as I say, above all, what you have to understand is my strong sense of the disapproval of the Catholic middle class from the march when it started, and then the total transformation to, these are fine young people who have been attacked by vicious rednecks, and the police are not doing a good job in protecting them.
But they were proposing to march through all of these large loyalist strongholds with a very obvious intention of provoking violence and disorder. And I thought, this is just ludicrous and dangerous, and it's not only irresponsible, it is morally wrong to go about, and politically counterproductive, but mostly morally wrong, to go about provoking tension, disorder and rioting where people are going to get, at the very least, seriously hurt, and possibly people get killed. How could you justify that? But they went ahead anyway. And of course, at Burntollet, they were deliberately and systematically ambushed by off-duty members of the B Specials.
The most vicious attacks on my people's democracy were in Killaloe. I remember that the Hibernian Hall in Clotty was used for them to stay overnight, and they then marched the 2 miles down the road to Killaloe. The violence used against those young people was simply scandalous. I don't think it was very wise to have a march from Belfast to Derry. I still think the march from Belfast by the students was mistaken, shouldn't have happened.
They would have known that they would be challenged. They would have known that, again, there was no point walking from Belfast to Derry if you were just walking. There was going to be no point doing it because it was never going to get headlines. If you left Belfast and Queens and walked to the Guildhall in Derry and as a group and nothing happened, then you were never going to get a moment's news on it. I suspect they didn't know that they would have known they were going to be challenged. Whether they believed they were going to be challenged so physically, I don't think so. And maybe because I was now a part of the young and all as it was, maybe now another establishment, that possibly we were now another establishment, that we had a thing going, or people who you're involved with had things going, and maybe seeing yourselves as the directors of what should happen. They were autonomous, they were in Belfast, they were doing their own thing.
I suppose the Burntollet March was different to the 5th of October March in that we were aware in advance. I've already outlined the October March came out of the blue for us, or out of the green maybe from the nationalist perspective. We're totally unaware of that. We couldn't say the same for this. This was flagged up fairly early on. And when Unionists looked at the route, it looked to Unionists as if this was a coat trailing exercise.